Welcome back, guys, to another video. It's Rich here, the second of 3 videos on the Megane. A couple of weeks ago you'd have seen part 1, which was me telling you why I thought the Megane RS250 Cup was the current buy of the year, with prices now having dropped and dipped under £5,000. I'll put a link up there to that video. This second video is going to look at the high mileage Megane. This particular one, my own, has hit the 150,000 miles. So that's going to look at ownership, running costs, and why I get so many times questions around how unreliable has it been, how much does it cost you to run. Well, we're going to look at the 4 years that I've owned, or 3.5 years that I've owned the car, and we're going to look at what costs I've put into it this year for both reliability, servicing, and also to prepare it for track. And then in a couple of weeks' time you'll get a part 3, which is where I take this and pitch it against my son's Volkswagen Golf Mark V GTI Edition 30. Welcome to this week's Fast and Fun. So my journey started with this specific car over 4 years ago. And it's where a friend of mine said, Rich, I want you to review the Megane. I think it was my first year of doing YouTube. And I'd not really considered Renaults at that time very much. And to say that it thrilled me was a real understatement. I realised how good the whole chassis and handling package was, with an engine that gave real world great performance, and in truth for the road enough. And then sort of 6 months later, my pal decided to sell it, and I picked it up for, I picked it up cheap, mates rates I think you'd call it. And even though it wasn't particularly what I was after at the time, I thought, you know what, it will do. I wanted a daily. It had at the time 111,000 miles on the clock, and that was 3.5 years ago. So in the 3.5 years I've put on almost 40,000 miles. So I've kept with this sort of 10,000 per annum running mileage in the car, and it's been used for everything, as daily go-to commuting car. I've done long journeys, I've done short journeys, I've done lots of track work in the car as well. And in truth, whatever I've done, it's managed to come through. The engine still feels strong, even now, 150,000 miles in. And so much so, with the cars that I drive, you tend to get a good feel for the power that cars have. And I was so smitten with the car, it just never felt like this only had 250. Hence I put it on the dyno to see if it was standard or actually had it been mapped, and no, it was standard. And on most B roads, without taking huge liberty and risk, it will stay pace with most cars. And that's the engine, still pulls strong. The gearbox still shifts. There's been all sorts of discussion on forums about synchros and issues with gearboxes. My gearbox is still fine. It's not the best shift, it's not the slickest shift, it's not the fastest shifting gearbox, but 150,000 miles in, including plenty of track, and it's still absolutely fine. From the outside, the paintwork, because it's white, can hide marks better than sort of a black or a dark metallic colour. So the paintwork is largely very good, certainly for the mileage that it's done. There's a few little scrapes and knocks and minor marks, but nothing that would give any indication of the mileage that's been done. Inside, again, it's devoid of squeaks and rattles and well, knocking will come on to, because that's largely suspension components. But the dash, everything inside the seats, everything seems well screwed down, bolted in, and has withheld the mileage incredibly well. The biggest telltale in truth is the yellow dot Recaros, with some of the elastic on the side bolster just starting to pull away, and the small tear on the right hand hip is just evident, and that's from many times of me scrabbling in and scrabbling out. It was thinned by 100,000 miles, and now there's clearly about an inch long gap there in the fabric. The other thing to consider is mine's not modified, so I'm not putting any significant boost, not putting the engine or the gearbox under much pressure at all. Everything is pretty much as it left the factory, and that's the reason for that is because I've never really, as a daily, wanted anything more. Yes, I could have had a simple remap, but I never felt lacking in the power department. That perhaps the only things that I've done for track will be brakes, which I'll come on to shortly, and the wheels. It runs on 19-inch sleeves. It would probably ride better on 18s, and if I had my time again, and you have the option, probably reducing that tyre diameter or alloy diameter would hugely help. But this here, I don't know how much you can see, but going along some of these forest roads, this car absolutely eats these roads. You've got to think, this car is worth no more than £5,000, and it's delivering a driving experience that many cars at 2 or 3 times that value cannot deliver. The way it covers ground and the LSD and pulling you around the corners, it's absolutely magical. And that turning, it's crisp and it's sharp and it's agile and it feels like it's right on its toes. It's just an intoxicating driving experience. That front limited slip diff is absolutely astounding, and the feel that cars nowadays, just with their electric steering, cannot get anywhere near what this can deliver. So I've generally serviced the car every year, or certainly every 18 months. And ideally it would have been every year, because obviously when you're doing track work and you're putting the car under quite a lot of load, you need them regular oil changes. The cam belt, that was done within about 6 months of me buying the car, because it was due. I think that's every 5 years, so that'll be due in probably 18 months-ish time. The cam belt's not as big an issue as it is on something like the Clio Sports, the easier access, and I think I paid just over 600 from a Renault Sport specialist as well. It did that. Generally, other than annual servicing of your filters and your fluids, the car has needed very little other than suspension. So these do tend to eat suspension components. Cup suspension, remember, front LSD, lowered, firmer, it does eat suspension components, but they are just consumable parts, and in large areas they're not that expensive. So, and I'll give you an example. So this year we found a cracked spring on the rear, so I replaced both rear springs. That was about £160 for the springs. They have this quirky, I think it's called anti-rotational linkage or link bar at the front that was causing a knocking, and I always replaced them in pairs. They were quite expensive. I think they were about £70 each, about £140 each, because I got OEM factory components. I had a drop link go, but drop links are £30-35. And I also replaced the dog bone mount as well, because there was just I felt a little bit of movement in the gearbox. Somebody advised the dog bone mount, bit of wear on that. That's almost directly under the gearbox here. That was about £65, plus obviously fitting. And what I tend to do is buy the parts and either do it myself, or I will get a local guy that I know that does a bit of home mechanics for me to do on the car. So they're the bits that I've done this year over the last 6 or 7 months to get the car in tip-top condition. Tyres is the other one. I've always been a bit of a sucker for Michelin Pilot Sport 4S's. That's all that's ever been fitted to this car. They are, for road, I think, give the best on-road performance you can get. In dry, they're very good. In the wet, they are astonishingly good. Track, when it's dry, they do tend to overheat a bit, but in theory, in practice, most road-going tyres do suffer as well. So, sort of 4 or 5 hot laps in this, and you can just feel them going off and just overheating, and therefore they lose the grip. Wet track performance, again, very, very, very good. But I am tempted there's the Goodyear Eagle F1 asymmetric 6s, there's the Continental Contact 7s, just because they're sort of 15-20% cheaper than the Michelin Pilot Sports. I'm just thinking whether it's worth dabbling and having a go at either of those next time round on the Megane. I also bought a service kit for this, which was your oil filter, air filter, pollen filter, and the pollen filter is a bit of a pain in the ass, and I might do a TikTok video on that actually to show you how you can bend and squeeze that in without dismantling half the bloody pedals under there. But so all your filters and the oil, that was under £100 for the kit. So, and then it's probably an hour and a half's labour to do it, either do it yourself or get somebody else to do it. So again, servicing these, not expensive cars to do, so there's no reason not to do it. For me, parts costs, I think, are really, really affordable from Renault. Things that were not as affordable though, and specifically this year, because I've wanted to take the car on track, and I have done so far this year, and I've got another 1 or 2 track days planned before the end of this year as well, is I wanted to get the brakes definitely up to scratch. So pads, discs, brake fluid, they're the 3 key things to change this car and make it absolutely track ready. Discs, I just use the standard OEM Brembo discs, so Brembo UV plain discs up front, standard discs at the back, and because these come as a hub on the back, the rear discs are quite expensive, but I did replace front and rears on this. I went with WinMax W5 pads on the front. They are absolutely outstanding. There's no squeaking and squealing when they're cold. They operate when they're cold. They're great for road, and on track, lap after lap after lap, you can stand on that brake pedal and the retardation is phenomenal. So if anybody wants to get a car ready for track or be occasional track use, I cannot recommend the WinMax W5s anymore. The W5s and the front Brembo discs all up for about 460, 470. I know it's, plus you've got to fit them. The rears, the rear discs are quite expensive because it's all got the hub assembly in the disc, and instead of going with just standard Brembos in the rear, which I did have a problem with at one circuit a couple of years ago, I now fit PBS Pro Race on the rears, because the rears are still working and can still cause problems if you only focus on the fronts. So not the same rating as the WinMax W5s, but I've had no problems at all, and literally standing on that brake pedal, it just throws you through the windscreen. I cannot rate. The setup I've got works really, really well, and I've also saved a bit of money, because where I used to swear by Castrol SRF brake fluid, it's so expensive. This time I've gone with Motul RBF 660. It's about a third of the price of SRF, and you know what? It's been outstanding. So all in, and the rear setups cost me just under 400. So with the brake fluid, you're looking at probably around about 850 on parts. That's quite a lot of cost, I get that, but that setup will do you for numerous track days and hard driving. And don't forget, you won't have to do your disc that often, although it is to be noted when you go for more track oriented pads which are harder, they do eat the disc more. Around about £1,500 I've put into this car through parts and a little bit of labour and some time doing these bits and pieces. So it's not being super cheap, but it has been the most expensive year. I am tracking the car, and the pads and discs that are on this car now are going to be good for numerous more track days and hard road driving as well. The car's never let me down. From my house up to Anglesey a couple of months ago, that's a long way. We drove up there, a hard drive up there, a whole day at the Anglesey track and a long drive back. It never missed a beat. Through hot temperatures, through cold temperatures, all in huge amounts of reliability. This notion that French cars are fragile by nature, the build quality is suspect, is just not founded. If you find the right car with owners that are doing the preventative maintenance, and I do think being unmodified or less modified will help with reliability. But 150,000 miles on this car and it still delivers, whether that's acceleration, braking, and most importantly in any Megane is the handling. It's still today one of the best handling, the feedback coming through the steering that you will ever feel and witness in any car at any price. So don't worry. If you find a good, well looked after, cared for example with a few more miles, I really wouldn't let it put you off. And this car now, today, with 150 on the clock, I wouldn't get 5,000 for this car in today's market. And that is why I did the first video, the part one, that just said this is got to be the buy of the year. Gents, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video on the Megane. Part 3 will be coming up in a few weeks' time, where I pitch it in a full-on shootout against a slightly modified Golf GTI Edition 30. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, thumbs up, subscribe, stay tuned. Another video next week. Thanks, guys.